Hi, in this tutorial, I'll guide you through the way you can set up the key verification example in .NET, and we're going to use C#, although the idea is the same if you would use Visual Basic. So the goal is to get the following sample to work, which you can access on our help pages. And we assume that you've already installed the .NET SDK, so there are two different versions, Cryptolens licensing and Cryptolens licensing cross-platform. You can install them through NuGet or download the binaries on the GitHub page. So let's start. We assume that we have created a project in Visual Studio, and we can just take a look at how it looks like. So if we go to the properties and then, we're going to go to the references. But we can see it's a .NET 4.6 project, but we can check the NuGet references, and then you'll see that I've installed Cryptolens licensing. So that's done. Now let's take a look at the namespaces. So when you go to the key verification page, you would choose the language. We're going to use C#, although if you'd like to use Visual Basic, you would use a different code snippet. But the idea is quite similar. So we copy the namespaces, we paste them in, and then you click on the link here, and you have a bit longer code snippet, so we'll paste it in here. You can remove the console read line. So there are a few things that you need to change to get this to work. And the first thing is the license key, the RSA Public Key, the auth or the access token, and also the product ID. There's also the machine code parameter that we can pay attention to, but I'll briefly mention that in the end. So first, let's check out how to get the RSA Public Key and the access token. So if we scroll up, we can see the way it can be done. So to get the RSA Public Key, we can open a new page, go to the API keys, and then we copy the RSA Public Key. So make sure there are no extra spaces, because that might affect this example. It depends on the language, but I think in .NET it should. So it should be quite, you can get I think we pasted it, yes, so that's correct. Then the access token. As you can see, there is already an access token available on this page, but I'd like to show you how you can create the access token yourself through the dashboard. So you can click on your username, you click on access tokens, create a new access token, let's give the name test, give it permission activate. So this will depend. So depending on the methods that you can see that you need to call, you will have to add a different permission, but for this code snippet, you just need the activate permission. Now, normally you'd also have to restrict it to a specific product. It's a good practice. We're not going to do that in this tutorial. Done. We have the access token. We can paste it in here. And again, as always, check for any extra spaces or typos. But as far as I can see, both the RSA Public Key and the access token are correct. So there is one more thing, and that is the product ID that has to be changed. So to get the product ID, you can go to the product page, and either you can get the product ID by going to a product page of an existing product, or if you like to create a new product, you can click on this link. Let's call it test or test 2022. You can leave most of the fields. In fact, you don't need to change anything by default. Click create. And then what we have here, the product ID, that's the value that we need to paste in here. So to sum up, the RSA Public Key, the access token, and the product ID. There's also the license key that needs to be changed. And we can create a demo license. So I'm just going to, let's say we can set feature. I think we're not checking for any features there. So let's say we set feature 3 to true. And that's it. And we keep the defaults. Create the license. Now we have the license key. Later you can change all the properties. So we paste the license key. And hopefully if we've inserted all the values that were necessary, it will work. So we can just check what's going to happen if we, so it'll take some time to compile. Great, the license is valid. So that's the only thing that you need to get this to work. We can also check, for example, so once you call this method key.activate, you get a license key object back. So you could, for example, you can check all the features and other parameters that were set. So for example, if we just go back and we can check that it was feature 3 that we set to true. So let's go back here, result dot license key dot feature 3, like this. We can also say that feature 3 like that. So if we compile the project again, right, feature 3 is set to true. That's because we did so in the portal. So if we go back here, if we disable it, then it's going to be set to false. So that's what's necessary. Now, I mentioned the machine code parameter earlier, and there are different ways of computing machine code. And the reason why you would like to obtain a machine code is if you would like to have a restriction of the number of concurrent users that are allowed to use a specific license. So there are two different models that one can use. The first one is node locked, and in that case, the activation is permanent. So to remove a device, you would have to deactivate it manually. And there is the floating model where you can set, for example, maybe your client has your application installed on 20 computers, but then only 10 of them are allowed to use it simultaneously. And that would be achieved with the floating license model, because it will then count the number of machines or number of computers that use the license simultaneously at one single point in time. To enable this feature, you would have to go to the license and then to set maximum number of machines to a value that's greater than 0. And this is really important because if you use some other code snippets where, for example, there might be a case where we can also check, or maybe let's put it for simplicity, or to make it more clear. Let's say that, for example, that once we have validated license, we can check helpers is on right machine PI, and then we provide the result.license key, and we set version parameters too. So if this is true, then we're going to say on the correct machine. And if it's not true, then we will say, we'll just, not that creative, but not on the correct machine. So if you just run this sample, it's not going to work. Oh, it's going to work, but it's going to tell you that it's not on the correct machine. And the reason for that is if we go back to the license and click on this button here, this will show you all the machines that have activated. So, and since the field here, maximum of machines, is set to 0, it disables the node locking or this restriction of how many machines they can use it simultaneously. So once you set it to, let's say, 5 and save it, then if I run it again, then it will say it's on the correct machine. And if we go back again to this page, we see right here, yes, it has activated. So that's exactly what we wanted to accomplish. So this is also very important. If you have these checks where you call the is on right machine method, it's very important that you enable node locking or floating licensing. And the first way of doing so is by setting the maximum number of machines to a value that's greater than 0. There's one more thing, which we've also mentioned a bit in the beginning, and that is that there are different ways of computing machine code. And there's some more information you can find. There's more information on, I think, right here. So if you scroll down on the GitHub page, there's some examples on how you can compute it. So for example, if you are developing Excel add-ins, or if you are on a special environment where the default method won't work, then there are alternative ways of computing it. In fact, there's no reason to use, there is no, you don't have to use the methods that we provide by default. And the way you define an end user can be customized. So for example, if you want to count each end user or each computer as a unique end user, then this would be the way to go. If you like to count the number of, include the number of concurrent processes that use the license simultaneously, you'd have to include a processor ID. There are other ways of defining it too. If, for example, if you are in Azure Active Directory, then you can retrieve the user identifier in a different way. It's also documented on the help pages. So that was a short tutorial on how to get the key verifications to work in .NET, and we focused on C#, and this works in Visual Basic too. So just to recap, to get the sample to work, you have to change the RSA Public Key, the access token, and here I'd recommend to create your own access token, not use the one, or especially in production, you have to create your own. You need to change the product ID, and the product ID could be obtained on the product page in this section. Then you'd have to create the license key, which you can create on the product page. We did that. And then we also talked about the machine code checking method, the is on right machine, and that is very important to set, if we go back, the maximum number of machines to value greater than 0 to get it to work. I would also mention one more thing that can be useful when you're debugging this, and that is that the result value that you obtain from, or the result object from the key.activate, it contains two things. It contains the license key and also contains a message. So it can be quite useful to know that you can check the message, result.message, for example, for any errors that might have occurred. And typically 99% of the errors, they occur because either the RSA Public Key is incorrect, maybe there's a typo in the access token, so it's very important to check for any extra spaces or any typos. And it could also be that the license key doesn't exist. In some cases, it could also be that the access token lacks the necessary permissions. There is another tutorial that I would recommend if you go to the FAQ and go to the troubleshooting API section. there's some more information on how to find the error message and what all those error messages mean. So I think we've covered most of it. If you would have any questions while trying to implement this into your application, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.